Welcome back to another lesson on Node Express MongoDB eCommerce API. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at the project setup. In our former lesson, we have configured the project by setting up the application to be listing on port 4000 as we specify here. So now we're going to change some things. Our port, we are going to make it dynamic, that can be set in the environment file. So in this case, we're going to come into our .env file and put port equal to, then we put our number there. We can say 4500 this time around now, so that it will change from what we have it to be before. Okay, so I'm going to make it 4500. Save that. Now let us come into the app.js. In the app.js, remember last time that we have imported the .env package. So we're going to require that in our project by coming and say require. You can see that as I am changing things, the nodemon is reloading. Require is a function that will require .env .config. This is to make it allow access into the .env file. In this case now, we are now going to make our port to be dynamic, constant port. Constant port will either it is getting it from the env, or we set this static of 4000. So I'm going to say process .env .port as we specify it over there. It's either you use this or you use 4000. Now you can see our server is now listing on port 4000, which means if you go back to the browser now and reload this page, 4000 will no longer work, except we change it to 4500. Everything is fine. That's the first thing we want to do here now. The second thing now is to start the project. So what we are going to do at first is that we are going to connect into the MongoDB by creating the mongoose connection. So for the purpose of separation of concern, I'm going to create a new folder here, call it db. That's the folder. Right inside the folder, I'll create a new file, and I will call the file mongoose.js. Now right inside the mongoose.js, I'm going to be creating the connection into the MongoDB. So the first thing I'm going to import constant, I'm going to call it mongoose, is equal to require mongoose. require mongoose. Then we also want to access the mongodb URL specified in the environment variable. So we're going to also do what? Use this to import the .environment into this. We need to paste that. Then we can now connect into our mongodb. So what we're going to do here is to create a mongoose connection that's going to return a promise. Say mongoose dot connect. At least we want to connect into our database. So which database are we connecting into? We specify the process dot env dot, what do we have? The mongodb URL. We copy this and put there. Dot mongodb URL. Then say dot, then when you connect, what will you do after connection? We want to say something so that we know that we were able to connect into the database successfully or not. So I'm going to create, let this return anonymous function, arrow function is equal to this. Then we return what? Console dot log. What will it log? It will log connected to DB. But in case, catch, if there is any error, we catch the error and then return what could be the reason for the error. So I'm going to do this here and say, if you want to log, you can just type this log to complete it for us. So we put it there that error occurred or you say error connecting to DB, and then we want to see the error. That is how we connect into our DB, but we've only created this inside our folder called DB and file called mongoose.js. Remember that everything on our application is coming into this app.js because that's the central point of starting our application. So if anything is going to happen, it must come into the app.js. So now let us see if we were able to connect into the database successfully or not. So we do the same thing as we did here. I will just do a copy and paste and edit few things. Let me remove this config, and then we put our mongoose here. We say here is dot slash db. You can see it's suggesting that slash mongoose. Okay, now you can see the message connected to DB, which means we have been able to connect to our database. Be able to connect to our database. If we check which database are we connecting to, NodeCommerce. Do we have NodeCommerce in our application yet, in our MongoDB? If I should come here and see, there's refresh, refresh databases. Okay. Yes, by the time we start pushing things, we're going to be seeing the database. Let's continue for now. Okay. So I think I may have to remove one connection so that it will remain just only one. So whatever we are doing, we know that we are seeing it through this. Alright, so let's continue. Okay, so we've been able to connect to our database successfully. The next thing is to create our models. Remember, I mentioned the other time that what we are going to have are the following. We are going to have in this application, we are going to have item, or we call it our product. We are going to have users that will be adding products, that we own each product, and then we are going to have a cart where people can add something to cart, and then we have orders where whatever they order on the application we go into. In that case, we are going to need to create a folder called models. I'm going to come here, create models folder. Then inside the model folder, I'm going to create file for each of those items that we listed out right there. So I'm going to right click. I'll create a new file. I'm going to call it user.js. I'll create another file inside the model, call it cart.js. Create another file, call it item.js. Let's create order. After the cart, we create order.js. Now let's begin to input the data for each one. So since the item is our major concern, which is the product, we're going to start with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import mongoose, just like we did right here in the mongoose. Okay, so for the item, we do constant mongoose is equal to require mongoose. Then we can begin to create the item schema. So I'm going to create the item schema, constant item schema. The schema is the one that will specify or determine the structure of our table in the database. Just like I mentioned to us that mongoose is the object that will specify the structure of our table in the database. I mentioned it earlier that when I was talking about the the packages that we're going to require, so I told us that mongoose is an object data modeling library for mongodb and Node.js, and it manages the relationship between data, provide schema validation, that's the first thing, and it is used to translate between objects in code and the representation of those objects in the mongodb database. So therefore, whatever our schema looks like here, the object looks like here, is what will determine the structure. So we say dot schema it is an object, which we are going to specify the structure of the object right here, and then afterwards we are going to export that object. So I will just come here and say constant the item is equal to mongoose.model. Mongoose.model. And what's our model? In the database, we want our model to be item and make the structure to be item schema that we're going to be determining here. After doing that, we do what? Module.export the item. Okay, so now let us specify the structure. Okay, is equal to item. So now what will be the structure of this? Let us start with the name of the product. The name, we can just specify name, and then we can just say it is a string like this. But because we want to put in some parameters, just like the string, it is required they must enter value for it, and it is going to be trimmed. So this will also serve as a way to validate our data as they enter. You can specify the minimum character, maximum characters, and all that. So in that case, this one, the value 2 here will also be what? An object, which will now become what? You now say, okay, the type of that data is a string, comma, then it is required will be true. There's no way they want to enter a product without name, and then trim whatever they enter in case they put white space, and that is also true. So that is for name. That's the first thing, comma. Our product is going to have description. The description too will take object, which is type and required. If we like as well, you can trim the description if you want to trim it. Then the product will have, let's say, category. I'm going to be creating category. So it will have, it's an object as well, and it will have similar thing. For price, we can just do this and paste. So price will not be string, it is going to be number, and it is also going to be required. So price. Then what other thing do we need? Afterwards, for all this, we want to do something that when MongoDB creates all these records, it should create a timestamp for them. So that is why after everything, we'll create another object like this and say timestamp is also equal to true. So with this, our item is ready. Then we can now go on and do the same thing for other items, maybe for users, for cards, for orders, and others. So let's do for users. I will just copy all that is here and go and edit, or for the purpose of learning, let us use our hand to enter that as well. So what do we do inside user? Inside user, we import the mongoose as we did earlier on. The mongoose. Then we are going to make use of bcrypt here, constant, because we use the bcrypt to hash the password like I explained the other time. So bcrypt is equal to require bcrypt.js. Okay, then JSON web token, constant jwt is equal to require JSON web token. Then we create the user schema. So we do the same thing, constant user schema is equal to new mongoose dot schema. So it's a function that takes in an object, then we declare all our objects. Before we declare the objects, let us export the module user schema. So we come down here and say constant user is equal to mongoose dot model that we take in is going to create a user table, and the structure of the table will be our user schema. Then we export the module dot exports is equal to user. Then we can now begin to create the objects. So we're going to start with the name of the user. Coming here, name. So what will the name be? It's going to take in another object that will be type of string, comma, it is going to be required is true, and then we trim it in case there is a space or white space in between, and then we convert it to lowercase irrespective of case you enter it. We keep it in lowercase. That is for name. Then we do email. Email is going to be an object that we take the type required lowercase. We are not going to trim email, but let's copy everything for now and remove the trim. Though we don't expect you to enter space in between your email, but we are going to validate the email. If it is not of type email, we will throw an error. So that is why in this case we need to download another package. So I'm going to create another terminal by clicking on this, open another control command prompt and type npm install validator. So we're going to need validator to validate the user input. Okay, installed successfully. So now we can now import the validator. Constant validator is equal to require validator. Okay, then we come down here now and say validate. It's a function. It's going to validate the value. Whatever we enter here is going to validate it, and then the validator will take an object that will be of type. We check if let me do this. If okay, if not validator dot is email, you can see it has given us access to some functions. So what we are looking for is email. That is, if it is email, the value of which you enter. If it is not of email, then we throw an error. Say true new error, and the error will be email is invalid. Okay, so that is how we make use of the validator. So now we can continue. That is that for email. We continue here and create another object. So let me format the document. Yeah, okay. So create another object which we are going to call password password will also be of type and required. The password will be string and required. Then it's going to have minimum length, min length, minimum length should be th gth min length, then that is 7 comma, then it is going to trim true comma, then we validate. So I'm going to copy what we did up there but edit it. So validate is going to validate the value, but this time around is going to be of password. So validate value, if value dot to lower, so the password should be in lowercase. To lower, let's convert it to lowercase and check. Though your password may not necessarily be lowercase, but we are just doing the conversion so that we can compare. Dot include now we don't want your password to include the word password. We don't want you to put password as your password. So if it includes password, then there will be no value this time around. We throw an error, say password, say password must not be password or must not contain password, must not contain password. That is for password. Let me format that. Okay, so comma here. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the purpose of JSON Web Token is because every user will, when they log in, are going to be having tokens. So we are going to create token that will be an object of token. This time around it's going to be an array of objects. So let me go back. You can see that I'm creating an array and I'll put an object inside it. So this is going to be an array of objects. Then we put in our object. Inside the object, we're going to have another token that will be object of type string, comma, and is going to be required just like others. You know, token is as well required to access an API. That is what it will be. Then at the end of everything, you know, this is the entire object. Remember what we did last time? We created our timestamp after everything. So we're going to do the same thing here now by creating an object of timestamp true. Okay, so that is how our user will look like. So we're going to continue with the other objects in the next lesson. Thank you.